Right now, OpenAI is part of the reason why Microsoft stock is selling off. It's down 17% over the past month and nearly 3% today, down 28.7% from its all-time high. Whenever I've done the Microsoft stock analysis video, I get comments basically every single time talking about the OpenAI risk. Even in my own Discord, there's constantly a discussion about OpenAI being a major risk and on the verge of collapse. And this significantly coincides with the AI bubble narrative. But just zoom out and think about the market's narrative right now. The logic is all over the place. We have seen a massive sell-off in software stocks over the past month, and this is due to the rapid advancements in AI, specifically around coding. They're also worried about employees being replaced, hurting the seat-based pricing model. The market is currently terrified that AI is going to kill every software company. Yet at the exact same time, we have videos like this going around over the weekend, getting 1.4 million views in a couple days, and there are countless viral videos claiming that AI is a huge bubble and some of the biggest labs like OpenAI are about to collapse. They say it's a waste of money, it doesn't even work, and Microsoft is being hit from both angles of this. On one side, they do have a pretty large software business, and on the other side, they're a 27% owner of OpenAI, and OpenAI is one of their major customers in the cloud. So which of these AI narratives is right? It can't be both. The reality is, neither of those narratives are true. In this video, I'm going to directly debunk many of the claims around OpenAI being ready to collapse, it being a major risk for companies like Microsoft who are partnered with it, and then we're going to take a look into the actual stock financials for Microsoft, and I'll show you why I think Microsoft is becoming a screaming buy in today's market, and really a no-brainer for growth investors, value investors, dividend growth investors. So with that said, let's get into the video.
The following reflects the opinions of a man who spends far too much time thinking about stocks. Please do your own research before making any investment decisions. Nothing in this video is personal financial advice. Continue at your own risk.
First, let's just talk about OpenAI and the collapse narrative. A guy in my Discord investor community recently shared a video today talking about it, and it went viral over the weekend. It showed up on my algorithm, and it's just one of many examples. By the way, I'm not throwing any shade at this guy in my Discord. Don't take any harm here. I'm just using it as a way to talk about the point. So I already watched this video, and I'm going to address some of the key points and why I think it's largely nonsense. But it is just one of many examples about this topic. Look, 2 days ago, 700,000 views. What happens when OpenAI runs out of money? From the same creator, 800,000 views. AI fails at 96% of jobs. 3.6 million, what Sam Altman doesn't want you to know. 1.1 million views in the last week. It's finally bursting with talking about OpenAI, Sam Altman. This is a huge narrative going on right now, just as big as the SaaS apocalypse narrative, the big sell-off among software stocks. I already addressed that in my earlier Microsoft stock analysis videos, so we're going to focus on the OpenAI risk today.
We are starting to test ads in ChatGPT Free and Go, new $8 a month option tiers. That's right, OpenAI is incorporating ads into ChatGPT. Now, for any other startup, this is normal, even expected at this point. But for OpenAI, it's an admission that things aren't going so well. In fact, it's their last resort. Those aren't my words, but Sam Altman's words in October of 2024. He stated,
I kind of think of ads as like a last resort for us for a business model. I would do it if it meant that was the only way to get everybody in the world like access to great services. But if we can find something that doesn't do that, I'd prefer that.
So the point going on here is that part of the OpenAI collapse narrative is that they're looking for ways to generate revenue. So to improve the actual business fundamentals. And right now, one of the big cost centers with OpenAI is their ChatGPT free plan, because there's no direct monetization on that usage. And one of the best business models for free web use and software is ads. This has been proven out historically. We have Google as the example. It's one of the most profitable. It might be the most profitable company in the world. And they are a digital advertising company with Google search. And the free version of ChatGPT is basically the best comp to Google search. So it would only make sense that they actually follow the same exact business model. I've been calling for them to do this for a while. It makes complete sense. And I actually think this will be a money printer long-term for OpenAI. But because everything's bad and OpenAI is going to collapse, this is a negative in this video. How dare they monetize their free users?
From Anthropic's Claude to the open source Chinese models, the consumer AI landscape has rapidly changed. Today, OpenAI is no longer the clear leader it once was.
This is partially true and misleading when we're talking about this. ChatGPT, yes, is losing market share in AI chatbots and in their API business, but what they're not talking about at all is that the pie is massively expanding. So while ChatGPT at one point was 90% market share, then 70%, and now it's just below 50%, they've continued growing users consistently in that time. They're about to hit 1 billion active users. That puts them up there with the biggest apps on the planet. But yes, it's a very competitive environment. There are tons of top competitors in AI. You have Google, who I think has a very strong position. You have Anthropic, which is going to be very strong in enterprise and specifically in coding. You have the whole Elon Musk complex of AI with XAI merging with SpaceX, and that has big distribution in the X app. So Grok will be around and be a competitor. And then you have the whole open source model movement. There is a ton of competition in AI. But the thing that people seem to not be able to grasp is that the pie is expanding. As we go back to this video, the next big negative was around NVIDIA investing in OpenAI, and that all of a sudden they're not going to put in as much money. And this is due to misleading reporting and assumptions people made. They had an agreement for NVIDIA to invest up to $100 billion into OpenAI, and that was going to be over many rounds as they had future fundraising rounds. It did not mean all at once. But of course, Jensen was asked about this and it went super viral and all of a sudden added to the narrative again.
Can I ask quickly about OpenAI again?
Sure.
So yesterday you said that the NVIDIA is not going to invest as much as 100 billion in OpenAI.
No,
is that for the current run?
we never said we were going to invest $100 billion in one round. That never was said.
But
Yeah.
how about the
Yeah.
overall commitment? Because last September you and OpenAI
there was never a commitment. It was if they invited us to. So let's start over again. They invited us to invest up to $100 billion, and of course we were very happy and honored that they invited us. But we will invest one step at a time.
All right, but is that overall commitment still stands? Or it's not
No,
a commitment?
I told you just now. Yeah, you keep putting words in my mouth.
Okay.
It's not.
Sorry about
yeah, I know that. Yeah. They invited us to invest up to $100 billion, and we are honored that they invited us. We will consider each round one at a time.
This went super viral. I really have no idea why. It's like people just don't know what they're talking about. OpenAI is constantly raising money from tons of different companies. You have Microsoft puts a little in, although they already did their massive investment into OpenAI. You know, you have SoftBank, you have Oracle, you have all these different companies that are putting money in, lots of investment groups. This clip, when it came out and went super viral, I was confused why it was even like news. Why was this? What was the new thing? So at best, like most things in this video, I think it's selectively put together. It's to build a narrative. It's somewhat misleading. And speaking of that, let's get to the next one, talking about AI. And this one is about how AI progress is slowing down. So now we're back to the narrative of AI is nonsense. It's a waste of money. It's not actually going to get to anything productive. And this one specifically gets down to the pre-training scaling laws. And again, it's misleading the way it's put into this video, assuming that there are not other advancements already happening. But we'll play the clip.
ChatGPT-4 was another leap forward, but GPT-5 and beyond wasn't quite the revolution that was promised by Sam Altman. It seemed like stagnation had hit, and hit hard. But why is this? It's an issue called the scaling problem. The scaling problem in AI, put simply, is the following. Giving LLMs exponentially more compute doesn't make them proportionally smarter. Once upon a time, this was true, but that seems to be coming to an end. Here's computer scientist Cal Newport to explain it in more detail. It takes a second to get through the story, but it's interesting.
In the beginning, we had language models. So we had these for a long time, and they were pretty good. You give them a bunch of text, and they were pretty grammatically good. They could produce pretty fluent text, but it was kind of, they would veer off, and they couldn't really respond well to specific questions. But that was like the state of the world, right? So we had language models. These were studied for years in academia. Then we start to get this sort of accelerating sequences of advances. So the first of these advances comes in 2017. It's a team of researchers at Google figure out a better way to build these models. They're called transformer architectures. The details don't matter, but it made it possible for these models to produce like long text, like produce a whole article, to produce a couple thousand words. So that was exciting. Then the second breakthrough comes. They do a research study. There's a researcher at OpenAI named Jared Kaplan, and he leads a group of researchers at OpenAI that includes Dario Amodei, who went on to become the CEO of Anthropic, and actually brought Kaplan with him. And they do a pretty simple experiment. They took basically GPT-2 and said, what happens if we make this bigger? It seems like an obvious thing to check, but there was this whole conventional wisdom in machine learning at this time that says like, look, you can't make a model too big. If you make it too big, it's just going to memorize the training. And then when you give it new examples, it'll be terrible. And they said, let's check what happens if we actually just make these things bigger and forget about that concern. And what they found in that paper was it gets much better. It like defied the conventional wisdom of decades within the field of machine learning, which was like, don't get too big. Your model's going to stop working if it gets too big. It's going to, it didn't. They're like, oh, it gets better. And not only does it get better, but it gets better pretty fast. And they drew a curve through the data points they had, and they extrapolated that curve, and it went up really fast. And so they said, let's try this. And the thing they tried it on was GPT-3.
The GPT-3 model hype encouraged OpenAI to just make the model bigger, 15 times bigger. The performance was so high that it validated the scaling laws. This sparked a frenzy in Silicon Valley. Soon, Sam Altman was saying that AI would automate the entire economy.
So not only did it jump ahead, it jumped ahead fast. So it really validated this curve. The normies don't know this because they weren't as plugged into the AI world, but this sent Silicon Valley going crazy. And like, oh my God, if we keep making this bigger, GPT-5 or 6, this thing is going to be artificial general intelligence. It'll be able to do anything a human can do. We might only be like 5 years away. All right, so what happens next? Well, they say we need to show this to the public. So ChatGPT is GPT-3 tamed for public consumption. So now the public all knows about this. 4 months later, GPT-4 comes out, and GPT-4 leaped up the curve exactly as predicted. Exactly. Huge leap forward, exactly as predicted by the paper. So now they're like, oh my God, we're like 2 iterations away. Like, this is it. All the money in the world needs to come to us because whoever wins this race is going to control the economy.
But despite this massive scale, we may be reaching diminishing returns.
GPT-5, they started working on it right away. So they build an even bigger data center, an even bigger model. They're calling this Project Orion. By the summer of 2024, so last summer, they finished training this thing. Altman is telling his people this thing is going to blow away GPT-4, and is like, this thing scares me. Scares me what this thing is going to do, right? Like, this is it. We're about to go through the looking glass. They trained this thing, then it stops working. Slightly better than GPT-4. Like, oh crap. This leaping up the curve every time we make this much bigger, this didn't work anymore. And so there was like this realization of, just making models bigger and training them on more data, the scaling law broke. It broke around GPT-4.
So I don't know if that video is just like outdated or old or anything, or taken out of context slightly. Basically what he's talking about there is pre-training, which is the super big main cluster to create the first foundation model of all these training runs. And yes, they did start to see diminishing returns in pre-training of the AI models. And that's because they already used all the internet's data. They already had these massive compute clusters. And it's also not even completely clear whether that pre-training scaling will not continue. It's just that the amount of compute and data available for it is not current. We've already kind of maxed out what we're able to do, and the returns are diminishing. But the reason why this is misleading is it's completely just not even talking about the major advancement that's happened over the past couple of years. And that's with post-training of the model. And that primarily is done through reinforcement learning. There's a human approach to that. And then there's also a non-human approach to it, which is scaling very well. And that is basically fundamental to all of the advancements that have happened in the past year to 2 years. Post-training has its own set of scaling laws. It's not clear at all that we're anywhere tapped out on that. Also, it's like completely ridiculous to say the models have not gotten any better. I am balls deep into this stuff. I am all over it, especially around software development and programming. It's game changing, the developments that have happened in the past year. And every few months, we're having a huge jump. The bigger thing going on right now with AI is the capability overhang. That's kind of becoming the popularized term. The models have actually become so good at so many different things, and they're very useful. But the problem is that humans don't necessarily know how to use them in all these different use cases. They haven't diffused throughout the entire economy. Even in software engineering, where AI is getting crazy good, many people, they refuse to touch it. And these are the most like tech forward people. Programmers are notorious for using like the best tools, being early adopters. And that's why you're seeing a large growth in that segment. But still, even there's a massive capability overhang. So the idea that these models are not improving rapidly, it's ridiculous, let alone the advancements in tool use, computer use, agentic logic. Oh my God, this stuff is going to get crazy over the next couple years. And then of course, because this video is ridiculous, they throw another example of these viral clips. People are so anti-AI, it's nuts. Not even talking about the whole political thing around data centers with people protesting everything. But a large chunk of people think AI just sucks. And he uses this in the video as evidence, some TikTok clip about asking ChatGPT voice about, and it messes up about whether or not you need to bring your car to the car wash.
I need to wash my car, and the car wash is 100 meters away. Should I walk or drive?
Honestly, 100 meters is barely a stroll. It'll take just a minute or two on foot. Unless you've got heavy gear or there's something unusual going on, walking is probably the simplest and most pleasant choice. Plus, you'll save a little gas and get a tiny bit of fresh air.
All right, so you think I should walk to the car wash instead of driving my car there?
That's what I'd do. It's a short jaunt and it'll probably be less hassle than starting the car just for that.
All right, so how do I wash my car if I walked there?
You'll just bring what you need, maybe a small bag with your payment method, and the car wash will have everything else. Once you get there, they'll handle the washing while you wait. You'll walk back with a sparkling car and maybe a little extra pep in your step.
So my question is, how will the car get washed if the car is still at my house?
I see what you mean now. If the par stays at home, it's not getting any cleaner, right? So yes, to actually wash it, you'll need to bring the car along. In that case, driving those 100 meters makes perfect sense.
Well, I guess that proves that AI is fake. It doesn't work. They're going to go out of business. I don't know what we're talking about. It's so ridiculous, guys. So if you can't tell, I don't agree at all with any of those parts of the argument. His next section is the only thing that even has anything to do with the idea of OpenAI potentially going out of business. And he calls this the financial black hole. And of course, there's not a lot of depth there. This guy likely isn't really that into business. And I actually can't believe he do this. He leads this section with a clip from 2019. 2019, guys, with an interview of Sam Altman talking about how they don't have a business model yet for OpenAI. They didn't even have ChatGPT for 3 more years. Of course they had no business model.
But it is a business. So I'm just wondering, like, eventually is the idea to kind of like license technologies? Will you have customers? You're going to be customizing algorithms for them? Or how is it going to work?
You know, the honest answer is we have no idea. We have never made any revenue. We have no current plans to make revenue. We have no idea how we may one day generate revenue. We have made a soft promise to investors that once we've built this sort of generally intelligent system, basically we will ask it to figure out a way to generate an investment return for you.
Oh, well, that proves that it's over. It's not. It's so ridiculous. They have no business plan. Meanwhile, the clip was from 2019. And then the next thing we get into, the massive losses at OpenAI. They're projected to lose $14 billion in 2026. They are literally just doing the hyper-growth playbook that Silicon Valley has been doing for decades. And I'll give a few examples, just to like give you a brief refresher of what this playbook is. They burn money, and it's all about a land grab. They want to capture market share. They want to get a good market position around the business, scale the technology, scale users. And just one example of this from the prior technological wave was Uber. They were losing massive amounts of money for a decade. Even as a public company, their earnings per share were negative for like the first 6 years. In 2019, they had negative $8 billion of net income. 2022, negative $9 billion. They were losing $4 and $3 billion of free cash flow a year. But eventually that flipped. They had the market position and they just focused on profitability. And what do you know, Uber, it generates $9.7 billion a year now. And it's in a pretty good market position. They have a lot of network effects that they've built up over the years. It's like people forget that like Sam Altman, he led Y Combinator for a long time. He knows startups. He is in Silicon Valley. He's just doing the playbook. He wants ChatGPT to be the #1 free application for users. It's a complete land grab. They're trying to get market share and it's worked. They have like 1 billion users now. And over time, that is going to flip. Not only is the cost of serving the models going to go way down, there's been like a 95% reduction, I think, over like the past couple of years, specifically for OpenAI. But we have things like ChatGPT with ads that's going to help monetize the free tier. They are still in the hyper growth phase. They have not had their core goal be profitability. They're not trying to. They are purposefully losing money. That's like the whole plan. This is a startup that is still raising tens of billions of dollars in these rounds. And there is tons of investor appetite still. They are not on the verge of collapse. I don't even know where people get this talking point. Also, why is this only a talking point for OpenAI? Why are they not bringing this up when they talk about Anthropic, or they talk about XAI, or they talk about within Google's business, the Gemini division? That's losing money. Dude, of course they are. This is a new thing. It's the cutting edge. They're trying to be the frontier labs. But for all of these examples, their gross margins are not negative. The unit cost of serving it is not negative. They are losing money because they are spending so much in development. They are building out infrastructure capacity. That's to train the next generation model and to expand capacity since it is growing so much. We are at a shortage of compute right now. They are trying to expand their capacity so they can grow more and serve the demand. Also, the free tier for these companies is losing money, so they either limit it, or OpenAI, which is going to take the Google playbook, they're going to do it with ads. That is what Google is going to do as well. Now, that does not mean that there is no risk for OpenAI. There definitely is. It is still in the hypergrowth startup phase, tons of competition. They are being very aggressive with signing future potential spending agreements. By the way, a lot of these are non-binding, so if they don't have the money, they don't have to pay it. They're just being aggressive to try and secure this so that their competitors don't get it. As an example, the Oracle deal with OpenAI, $300 billion total deal. I think that starts kicking in 2027. But to the best of my knowledge, if they don't have the money, it can be delayed. The compute can be used for other providers. But right now there's a massive compute shortage. So they're just trying to get the infrastructure built. So if you can't tell, I don't agree with the OpenAI is a ready to collapse narrative, but it is going to need to continue growing at a very high rate to be able to hit their spend commitments. And they're going to need to keep raising lots of money along the way. So monetization will be a very important thing for the company over the next couple of years. I think the ads and ChatGPT, it's going to be a very big business over time. It will definitely start small, but over 5+ years, it could be one of the larger digital advertising platforms. And we've already seen the ability to scale for a lot of these. We have Meta as an example, and actually a lot of the people who design the Meta advertising business now work at OpenAI. We also have Google Search as an example, and these are both cash cow money printers. And OpenAI, this is kind of unique to their business, the whole at scale free AI assistant. Anthropic's not going down that route. Their free plan sucks. They don't have a lot of consumer users. They're not really a play in consumer. They're all over enterprise. They're focused on programming. They're focusing on their API business, and that is growing very fast for them. OpenAI also plays in that, but then they have this consumer space. And currently this entire side of the business is basically being viewed as a red flag, like the end of the world. I don't think it's that clear. I think this could be a very valuable business, the whole ChatGPT free angle. And in terms of their model development, there's a lot of positive things going on at OpenAI. They basically caught up in programming. Codex is really hot right now, especially among like the hardcore AI vibe coder crowd. Claude Code and Codex, they're kind of the leaders right now. You can really start to paint an actual positive vision as well, and that seems to be completely absent from the public narrative. As an example, they just got the Peter Steinberger guy who created OpenClaw, the open source project, which exploded. It basically allows you to create AI agents on your computer. This is way too deep of a topic to even bring up in this video, but it's basically like a whole new interface for interacting with AI. And in my opinion, I think it is the pathway for personal assistants, digital employees, which I think is going to be a huge thing in the coming years. And now OpenAI has that guy working for them, and they will help bring the technology of OpenClaw to their billion users. And you're going to see this start rolling out over the next couple months, and they're probably going to create a way more user-friendly version of the OpenClaw interface. It's pretty technical if you're not like a programmer. A little hard to set up, but this is probably going to be a huge product for OpenAI. And in my opinion, I think it'll be a huge thing for Microsoft as well in the enterprise. And this is going to be an explosion in AI, both in the API business, because you need to connect your API for these things to work. And these agents, they eat tokens too. So there is a massive demand for intelligence. So as we stand here today in early 2026, OpenAI is being looked at as an anchor around Microsoft, a negative. They're assigning negative value to it. Meanwhile, Microsoft owns 27% of the company, something that probably will be a $1 trillion company itself and has tons of distribution, and that's being viewed as a negative. And the one thing that I really just don't think is being discussed is the massive exponential growth that's going to be happening with digital intelligence. The pie is going to be expanding and expanding and expanding. OpenAI, I think with ChatGPT, they're going to capture a pretty big slice of the consumer side. Microsoft already has massive sales and enterprise distribution with their Microsoft 365 and really decades of business. I think they have a good chance of capturing a large slice of that enterprise business. And as we look at Microsoft stock today, I think it's deeply undervalued. As you can see, the stock price, it's down to $387. It peaked at $542, but you really can't just look at price in isolation, because if you're looking at the stock price here, you would say, oh my God, it's still pretty high. Look, only a few years ago in 2020, it was $230. But what you're not factoring in is the actual growth of the business behind it. As you can see, their quarterly earnings per share have continued to climb year after year after year. They just reported $4.14 in the latest quarter. In 2020, that was $2. So the company's doubled their earnings in that time. And as we look right now, as I'm recording this video, Microsoft stock is actually the cheapest it has been in nearly a decade. It's trading at a forward P ratio of 22. That is as cheap as in the lows of November 2022 during that 2022 tech sell-off. And just as a reminder, guys, that was before ChatGPT launched. It was before the whole AI boom, and Microsoft is growing much, much faster now than it was then, but it's trading at the same multiple. Analysts are projecting 10 to 20% plus annual growth. That's in their earnings per share. And this is very reasonable estimates. That'd be $33.41 in annual earnings per share by 2030, which at today's stock price would be 11.5. And Microsoft, it's not done growing by the time it gets to 2030. If anything, it might have another decade of high growth after that. It is currently trading below the lowest price target on Wall Street of $392. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. So I'll dive fully into what's actually driving the growth at Microsoft, why I think it's very realistic they will keep growing, and why I think the risk around OpenAI is dramatically overstated as a risk to Microsoft's business, and how the worst case scenario really is not bad at all. Something that's being viewed as a negative right now, I don't even see a scenario where it is negative. And since this is a Microsoft video, we'll transition into Excel here. I have my new dividend data for spreadsheets tool. There's big news on this coming later this week, so stay tuned. And basically, I'm going to dump in the key performance indicators for Microsoft stock here. And this will help us get a vibe of what's actually going on behind the business. So this right here is the Microsoft Cloud revenue. This is the core growth business of the company. It includes both Microsoft Cloud 365, which is all of their applications they sell in the enterprise, Word, Excel, Teams, their whole suite, plus Microsoft 365 Copilot and their new agentic products, Agent 365, which is coming out. And this is how most people, when they think of Microsoft, they think of Windows and then they think of Microsoft 365, because these are like the consumer facing things people use. But if you're a developer or if you work in anything having to do with cloud hosting, Microsoft Azure is really the core business of Microsoft at this point. Behind Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure is the top player. They're number 2. Google Cloud's number 3. It's growing really fast. All of them are growing pretty fast, especially when you consider how large these businesses are. And Microsoft Azure, they grew a lot from the web growing. People hosting services, databases, and all these different applications. It was the whole idea of compute as a service, infrastructure as a service. So all these companies that had their own data centers as they were trying to scale, you basically offload that to these hyperscale cloud providers. And it actually was a fantastic service. It still is. So like for me with dividenddata.com, I don't have a huge server rack that I am delivering my web app and data to you guys with. I actually use Microsoft Azure. I could use Google Cloud. I could use Amazon Web Services. And I am just a small time guy right here. But the biggest growth driver in the data center business right now is AI. And it's not the AI pre-training that we were talking about earlier. It's inference, which is the use of the models that have been developed. And Microsoft is building giant infrastructure. They probably are the leader right now in total inference available. And that's due to their large partnership with OpenAI. They were an early investor, so they've been building this out for quite a long time right now. And basically how you can think of that is they're producing tokens. And these tokens are like intelligence. So Microsoft is creating token or intelligence factories. And that's a huge growth business in Azure. The infrastructure that Microsoft is building, it's not model dependent. It's not designed specifically for OpenAI. It can serve any of the models. Microsoft's business is completely model agnostic. They don't care. They serve the top Anthropic models. They serve the top XAI models. I think they serve some Google models. I'm not sure. They serve all the OpenAI models. They even have started training their own models, which are going to become even better over time. They serve those. They serve all the open source models on US infrastructure, which is a big thing. So that kind of gives you the view of what Microsoft is doing. Their cloud revenue, going back to 2019, it has grown rapidly. It used to be $12.5 billion a quarter in revenue. That has grown to hit $51.5 billion a quarter. If we go back just 5 years, they're making more in a quarter than they were in a year. And that rate of growth is continuing very high. Here you can see Microsoft Azure. They don't report the exact revenue every quarter, but they do report the year-over-year growth rate. And as of the latest quarter, it was growing 38% year over year. That's why they're investing so heavily. This has become their largest business segment, and it's growing nearly 40% a year. All of this compute is currently being used. They need more compute. They are compute constrained. That's the constraint to growth. And right now, there are no signs of any dark GPUs or things that are being built and not being used. Everything is being used. This is a key difference from the dot-com era bubble, where they were building infrastructure that wasn't even being used yet. They were future-proofing. Right now, we're way behind on compute. We would be using way more if it was available. So Microsoft Azure and their whole cloud business is a huge growth driver for the company, and that continues in the age of AI. The only concern around this business right now is Microsoft 365 and the fact that commercial seat growth has slowed, and that's due to less hiring in a lot of white-collar work right now. We've seen this as a trend really since 2022. It's hard to tell how much of that is AI-related and not, and the people that are very worried about the software apocalypse, one of the narratives is around seat growth and the fact that a lot of employees may become digital employees that do their work for them, and it's unknown how that gets monetized. People are worried about job loss with white-collar work. But the interesting thing is that despite slowing seat growth, Microsoft is still seeing their overall commercial cloud revenue grow, and that's due to new value adds that are being thrown into the services. A lot of those have to do with AI. If you want the best version of Copilot that integrates into Excel, Word, and all of your Microsoft suite, you have to actually pay up for that. So that's why their revenue growth is actually far higher than the seat growth. I think seat growth is going to be the misleading metric to be focusing on, unless they redefine seat growth to include AI, as if they go down the route of digital employees, which I think long-term, that's where this is all heading. If they include a seat as being a digital employee, then seat growth can expand massively. But if they don't and they just monetize it through other ways, then I think focusing on overall cloud revenue growth will be the bigger play. And the last big point I'm going to talk about here as we're diving into the Microsoft financials is their total remaining performance obligations, or their RPOs. And this is basically the money that is contracted to be owed to Microsoft. A big chunk of that is related to the Azure business, people trying to book out and reserve compute for their use. And you'll notice they had a huge surge in the latest quarter. And that has to do with their massive CapEx spending and why they're expanding so much. They have a lot of booked revenue in the future for this. That went from $398 billion to $631 billion. And that jump was actually viewed as a negative. And the reason is because half of it was coming from OpenAI. And a lot of that was actually into the future. It was not over the next 12 months at NTM. I'm pretty sure that's what that means. And you'll see the drop of the percentage of the total RPOs over the next 12 months. So this is another point that was being brought up in the OpenAI negative narrative around Microsoft. But I'm not entirely sure if this is a negative. They're building out this general compute infrastructure that can be applied to any model. It's not specifically to OpenAI. If OpenAI can't fund this, the compute will be used and paid for from another provider like Anthropic, or people will be using open source models off of the compute. People may even be running XAI models off the compute. They could even be running OpenAI models off of the compute but it's just not going towards ChatGPT. It's going through some other application. The intelligence, the models, no matter what, it's going to be used. I think it's extremely unlikely that there will actually be any fundamental risk to Microsoft. They are building their entire business model to be model agnostic. They don't care. With that being said, they have invested heavily in OpenAI. They have built a customer relationship with OpenAI. But both of these parties, they're diversifying. Microsoft hosts tons of different models on their infrastructure. OpenAI is starting to have infrastructure partners because ChatGPT is such a massive platform, they need a lot of compute. Azure's not providing all of that. OpenAI works with other companies. They're building a huge deal with Oracle to fund that compute. Microsoft's just one of the providers. OpenAI is just one of the models. And I'll dive into what I think the worst case scenario with the OpenAI Microsoft relationship is. But first, let's just load in the CapEx so that we can understand how much money they're spending, which is one of the big risks around Microsoft right now. And really all of these hyperscale data centers, they're spending tons of money. But personally, as someone that's been following this space, I don't think it's that risky. Microsoft in the latest quarter, they spent $29.8 billion in CapEx. And this is a part of the massive expansion in CapEx at Microsoft. They're investing a ton in new data centers being built. These are very expensive. Over the trailing 12 months, that's up to $83 billion. And you can see the massive expansion that's still happening. This is not going to stop anytime soon. Microsoft will be spending hundreds of billions of dollars a year into CapEx. But again, this is funding the growth of their core business. They need this to run their own models. They need this to support their customers. And there's only a few businesses in the world that can even spend this much CapEx. And you're seeing it happen. It's Alphabet. They're pledging nearly $200 billion a year in CapEx in 2026. The same with Amazon. They're spending nearly $200 billion. A lot of that's going towards AI infrastructure. Meta spending, I don't remember what it was, but like $160 billion. These companies are not crazy. If you're in AI, you need this compute right now. And despite these massive increases in capital expenditures, Microsoft has remained free cash flow positive throughout all of this. Just in the quarter prior, they had record free cash flow per share, $26 billion of free cash flow in that quarter. The quarter prior to that, $26 billion. So throughout this massive CapEx spending, I think Microsoft will remain free cash flow positive. They might take a slight dip in the next couple years in terms of free cash flow, but their operating cash flow and their revenue, it's going to grow significantly. I actually think Microsoft is taking one of the least risky approaches to this AI investment of those players who are actually competing. Obviously, Apple is taking a far less risky approach by not playing, but of those who are playing in big tech, Microsoft has a pretty conservative approach, especially when you consider that they were already in the hyperscale business. They know what they're doing. This is not a new thing that they're trying to get into. The current lowest price target on Wall Street for Microsoft stock is $392, so it's currently trading below the lowest price on Wall Street. The average price target among only the ones since 2026, January 29th, average price is $540. So that implies the stock is significantly undervalued. And you saw a $590 price target from Cantor Fitzgerald just on January 29th. So as I look at Microsoft in 2026, with a clear path to growth in AI around their core businesses, trading at the lowest valuation in recent history, I think this is a clear moment where you can buy a great company trading at a fair price. And there are a ton of fears going on right now around AI, around software, around Microsoft, around OpenAI. And to bring it back to my favorite investor, Warren Buffett, I think this is a time to be greedy when others are fearful. So I'm buying quite a bit of Microsoft stock. It's become a core position of mine. I just added even more today. And relating back to the whole OpenAI scenario, it's being viewed as an anchor on the business right now, a negative. It's not. The worst case scenario that I think exists with Microsoft's relationship to OpenAI is that OpenAI, maybe 4 years from now, they have too much spend commitments or they're losing money. They need to look for an acquisition of some kind. And Microsoft might have to come in as someone who already owns 27% of the company, has a huge balance sheet, a cash generating business. Maybe they have to acquire OpenAI. Oh no, the worst case scenario. I'm sure that'd be a real negative that they have to acquire 1 billion users on a huge consumer platform and a very large enterprise API business as well. Oh no, they have to have one of the top AI labs. They might have to spend $500 billion or $1 trillion for that merger. Now, as I'm saying that, I actually don't even know if that would be approved necessarily, but I think it's pretty clear that the ownership stake Microsoft has in OpenAI, that's a positive, not a negative. a lot of companies would be dying to own 27% of OpenAI. So with that said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. All of this is just my opinion. Be sure to do your own research before you make any investment decisions. And be sure to check out the channel later this week because I have a massive update coming with dividenddata.com. Look forward to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.